All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the monthly APAC meeting for SIG Docs. I am Jim Angel, one of the co-hosts here at SIG Docs. And today is July 28th, 2020, or July 29th, depending on where you're at in the world. So first, while we're getting started, I know many of you have said you had experience in SIG Docs before, but you're new to me, so it's great seeing you face-to-face for the first time. Would you care to introduce yourself? And I'll start with API and work our way down here.
Who should start first? Should I start first?
Yes, please.
Okay. Pleasure to meet you guys. My name is Ippei Suzuki. I represent a Japanese company called Creation Line, and we've been a CNCF Silver member for quite a while. Currently, the first Japanese companies to become one, and we've been very keen in open source software for quite a while. And Kubernetes is definitely the one that we're riding on the wave. We have our business is to provide solutions to customers in Japan. I personally actually live in Los Angeles, Long Beach, California. And I used to travel to Japan almost every month, but my last travel was the end of February. And since then, the Zoom fatigue is building onto me as that's the only way of communication. Yes, SIG-wise, I don't have much involvement in, but I have a group of engineers who are heavily involved in a number of projects as of end users, and very interested in see how things are progressing. So very, very happy to be able to pick up some information today.
Awesome. Awesome. Welcome. And so let's go on to Jiri.
Yeah, hi everyone, very pleased to meet you. My name is Jiri. I'm currently based in Jakarta, Indonesia, for the past 2 years, working for a company called Gojek, startup in Southeast Asia. Basically, we started as a ride-hailing company. We expanded to other countries as well. Nowadays, we became a financial technology company. It's pretty much, if you come around in Southeast Asia, you can see us. Basically, if you want to order food or go somewhere else, you will use our application. I used to live in Japan as well, and in the Bay Area as well. For the past, I used to live there for 8 years before I came back home here in Indonesia. And because of the recent progression with the tech community in Indonesia, I started to start cloud native and Kubernetes communities in Indonesia, and started doing this localization project as well, because not everyone knows English, obviously, here. And we've been pretty happy seeing the traction in the community as well, trying to help out and getting them engaged. This project is very helpful. And when we go to other cities in the remote areas, this project has become our great toolings to like share technologies without coding, right? Without coding for this project, we are able to share how CI/CD works, how we contribute to open source, how does the pull request work, and things like that. So a lot of things to learn without coding in terms of technology. Yeah, that's all. And I'm bringing my friend here. Aris, you want to introduce yourself?
Okay. Thank you for the time. My name is Aris. Currently, I based in Singapore. Work as a research fellow in one of the university in Singapore. Yeah, but in the same time, I also work for software engineer in the one of the national lab here inside the campus also. And then actually, I'm very new with this community because I just met Jiri maybe last year, and I'm pretty interested with the idea of the SIG Docs to have some documentation totally in Indonesia. So that's why I joined the like SIG Doc ID in the early of this year, and then I try to have some contributions for the translations or localization. Yeah. So my background actually, I'm not what they say. I'm not pure software engineer. Basically, before I worked as a network engineer, and currently I also serve as Open Networking Foundation's ambassador. So mostly, I mean, my field is about the network, but now I little bit expand my uh, specialty into like cloud native area. So it has been very nice, what they say, engagement with all the communities, including in Indonesia or in some others event. I also met some another people. So I hope that it can be a part of what they say collaborations between the networking part and also the cloud native part. Yeah, yeah. I think it's enough for me. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you very much, and thank you for the introductions. It's great meeting everybody for the first time here. I do want to apologize for mispronouncing your name, so I'm sorry about that.
No problem. Yeah.
So let's move on to the updates and reminders. And the other piece I'll add too, it sounds like the people involved in this call might be relatively new. If there's anything that I'm explaining that doesn't make sense, or you're like, hey, what is that, buzzword that you're saying, or that specific attribute for docs that you're talking about, feel free to interrupt me. There's just the four of us. Happy to have this be a little bit more of an informal meeting if you would like. So moving on to the updates and reminders, this week's PR Wrangler is myself, and next week is Karen Bradshaw or KB Hockey on GitHub. And if you're an approver, make sure you know your scheduled PR Wrangler shifts, and there is a link in the agenda, which I will also send in the chat here if you don't have it.
Jim, can I ask something?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm curious how you guys do the peer wranglers in the upstream SIG Docs community.
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
how do you rotate shifts, and when there are dangling PRs, we call it PRs that are unfinished in that particular particular assignee, how do you guys hand over those PRs and things like that?
Yeah, so there is the idea in the Kubernetes community of aging out certain, actually, I don't think it happens for PRs. I was thinking that's more of issues. But to answer your initial question, we take week-long shift schedules that we change with the different approvers, where that entire week, the approver is responsible for going in, reviewing pull requests, and taking care of some of it's housekeeping, some of it's seeing the status of the pull request. There is an actual very good overview of what a PR Wrangler does on the Kubernetes website, and I'll send a link in the chat here as well. But ultimately, at least I'll speak for myself here, as a PR Wrangler this week, what I'll end up doing is go through and see if there are PRs that are open where someone has not signed the CLA. What that is, the contributor license agreement, which is required by every pull request. And then I'll start to work my way up from there. And some of these links and searches are actually in the website that I sent, or the link that I sent. Then I'll kind of work my way through as far as what PRs need a LGTM or it looks good to me tag. I'm not sure how familiar you are with the overall workflow of the Kubernetes project, but almost everything is done by a robot and GitHub comments. So somebody needs to approve a PR and somebody needs to identify a PR looks good to them. And assuming all the permissions that they have associated with their account, then the PROW robot will actually merge that PR into the repository. So ultimately, we'll work through various size PRs. So another approach that I'll take as well is I'll start with the smallest PRs that are very easy to review, especially when it comes to documentation, and slowly work my way up to larger PRs. Occasionally, the PR Wrangler is not just approving PRs for the sake of moving the pull request number to be a lower number. Sometimes you're saying this PR has been open for 30 days with no activity. Let's either move it forward or make an agreement to close it if there's no activity from the original contributor as well.
One of the interesting cases that we found out in our community is that a lot of people are new to contributing to open source. They raise pull requests. They have localized a full page, we gave them comments, but they didn't address them. So after like a month or so, it's kind of sad if we throw the PR away, right? So what we ended up doing, we take those PRs and then we raise the PR with this folks as a co-author. Yeah, so we hope that their contributions still counted in that way, because there will be two commits, right? In that case, two commit authors, which I hope will be counted there.
Yeah, and that makes sense. And unfortunately, we do see that also with the main pull request for the docs community. Usually what I'll end up doing, and this is mainly the nature of the contributor license agreement, if they haven't signed that in a certain number of days, what I might end up doing is say, hey, you know, we're really happy to have this PR, but if there's no activity on it in the next 7 days, 2 weeks, whatever a reasonable time frame is, say, unfortunately, the next person who's doing PR wrangling might close this issue, unfortunately. But I definitely agree too, especially when we're talking localization. There might be less pull requests being opened up. Maybe that's valuable contribution. Not that the ones that get closed are not valuable, but there's a lot more contributors to the English documentation than there are for the localization. So it makes sense to me why you'd want to keep that and potentially have another contributor provide that pull request. Absolutely.
So is there any what they say, like recommended durations? How long we need to keep the PR open, or is up to the concession?
Yeah, so I don't know if there's necessarily a rule of thumb. I end up, when I'm reviewing pull requests, I would say a month is about a solid timeline to give somebody to either respond to comments, make changes. It really depends on the overall contribution, the size of it, who's been engaged on it, how many reviews. If a PR has never been reviewed and everything else is fine, it's not fair for saying, nobody reviewed this, we're closing it because there's no action in 30 days. But
Okay.
but yeah, ultimately it's a judgment call. But you want to make sure that the folks who contribute to the document or the PR are being active, responding to reviews, and helping move the process forward.
Okay.
So that answer your question about what the PR Wrangler does or how we approach that with the docs? Cool.
Yeah, good for now.
Awesome. Sounds great. So moving on to release updates. So the release team has been doing a really great job for the Kubernetes 1.19 release. They're responsible for collecting all the documentation for the new features or enhancements in the 1.19 Kubernetes release. And Savita has done a great job at making sure all the PRs have been merged, as well as the rest of the SIG Docs team. And right now the status is green. There's no merge conflicts. I recently have merged a synchronization PR between the master branch and the development 119 branch. We're in a very healthy spot, and there's been a lot of great leadership on the release 119 team. So I'm going to skip over these next two bullet items. We don't have a Korean localization update, which normally Junyi would provide. We also don't have any updates from the blog. As far as I've seen from some of the pull requests that I have performed or reviewed, the blog looks like it's healthy, it's active, things are moving well in that area. And as far as issues in PRs, there was no issues or PRs brought to our attention that need review. I did look at the overall pull request health of the Kubernetes Docs website, and we're at about 129, I think, open pull requests, which is relatively good for the Kubernetes documentation. We like to stay around 100 open pull requests. With some of the different localizations and onboardings, we've started to grow a little bit on the, I would say, mid to higher side. So we're more like 125, 150 is a healthy spot to be. And then I would say about a month or two ago, we were getting upwards of around 200 open pull requests as far as just being that kind of running total. So we're in a very healthy spot right now, in my opinion. The last item here on the agenda is about Hugo and Doxy in a container. So this is an item that was brought up on some of the weekly SIG Docs release calls. And in this case, it's how do you build a container to serve Hugo, to build out the documentation, to either make your edits or contribute to the documentation. There's been a lot of work being done there to containerize it, to solve some issues. There's been problems with building too many open files. And there's kind of multiple streams of work going on here. So the first stream is there's too many files that get generated when you run Hugo build on the current Kubernetes documentation or on the Kubernetes website. The too many files open is we're trying to resolve that by using a container that has Hugo in it to then not use your open files on your Mac, or the number of open files, if you will. In addition to that, instead of making contributors build their own Docker container, we're also evaluating potentially providing a Kubernetes website official Docker container through one of the Kubernetes infrastructure or one of the Kubernetes repositories. So instead of the instructions saying, go to the Kubernetes website repository, build a Docker image, run that Docker image, you could ultimately just do a Docker pull, for example. So we're really just trying to streamline the contribution aspect of documentation and really dealing with some of the challenges that were introduced when we added a new theme to our docs, which added a lot of more additional files. So no real update there other than work is still being done. The makefile has been updated. Things are moving forward in that front, and everything seems to be moving in a positive direction. So other than that, that's pretty much our entire agenda. Is there anything that anyone on this call would like to discuss?
Yeah, from me, especially the new release, right? 119 Kubernetes. For us, localization team, so far we have translated around 160 pages, if I'm not mistaken, and most of the pages we localize from the English page, so completely new pages for us, which is easy, right? The challenge comes when those pages get updated. Like in this case, in release 119, we don't really have a tracker which pages we have to update. And then for us, we do still have a lot of work to localize more and more pages, right? And so keeping up the updated pages remain a challenge for us. Do you have any suggestion on how to tackle that problem?
That's a great question. And is the question more broad as far as any sort of pages that get updated, or purely from a release 119 or the next future release is the bigger challenge?
Purely on keeping up the updated pages, keeping up with the updated pages.
Yeah, that's an interesting challenge, definitely, and something that I haven't considered. So I'd hate to give you a short-sighted answer without fully thinking about the different options here. The release 119 and the future release work is a little bit easier of a problem to solve. I guess the first thing is that all the enhancements that are going into the release, so all the enhancements that are going into 119 are tracked by the documentation team, and there might be some sort of collaboration that could be done there to say what enhancements and documentation are coming in that localization could potentially help with or get a jump start on. But that would also indicate that your team is localizing the documents as they come out. So like you're chasing that as soon as 119 is released, you're expecting localization to match 119. And I think more commonly than not, localization is usually a release or two behind. And so once the actual release lands, there's additional time to catch up or to fill in whatever is missing from that documentation perspective. But it is an interesting challenge if you have documents that you've already localized and then they've been updated in English. How do you get those changes back to the localized documents? And that I don't have a great answer for it. I would love to bring this up at the Tuesday weekly meeting and maybe get more additional suggestions on that.
Do you know how other localization teams doing it? Like the Korean team, or the Chinese team. They've been pretty good job in translating a lot of pages. I think they're ahead.
Yeah, I don't want to misspeak here, but I do believe there are some additional scripting tools and utilities that the Korean localization team might use. And I want to say that they're tracking, I thought it was just the different branches, but it's possible they're tracking documents that have changed. So that's a great point too, is potentially talking with Junyi from the Korean localization team, or if you haven't joined, there is all the different localization Slack channels. So one thing you could potentially do is join the Korean localization Slack channel and reach out to them and say, you know, what is your best approach for keeping up with these documents? And maybe there's better advice there who have faced the problem where, you know, I don't have experience in that area.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we'll do that. Thanks.
And I also sent the name of Junyi in the chat if you wanted to reach out to him as well. Give me 1 second. I'm just typing notes here. Yeah, I would be really interested in hearing how other teams are solving this. It's definitely not a unique problem. It's a problem that I haven't personally considered, but I mean, every localization team is going to face this and keeping up with this. And maybe there's already an answer I'm just not aware of. So let's make sure we get that figured out. Great. And so any other topics, open discussion, anything we'd like to chat about?
Yes, Jim. Regarding Japanese localization, I recall that Fujitsu and Yahoo Japan have been active up to a certain point. Is there a group that is continuously active in making sure that they are up to date with the localization?
Yeah, absolutely. And once again, and I I hate to keep deferring everybody to the different localization Slack channels, but you're going to get the most answers in the Japanese Docs channel.
Okay.
And do you have the URL for the Slack too? I don't know if everyone's active on the Slack.
If you can post it over to me, I'll be more than happy to jump in and see what I can do.
Yep, I just sent it there. If you click on that link, it'll give you a registration. I sent it in the chat.
Okay.
And like I said, the Japanese localization sub-channel is going to be the best spot to start.
Right.
There is a very active Japanese contributor with the handle Inductor who is very helpful for the Japanese localization, making sure that things are up to date and everything is moving forward. And I'll also send that handle in chat here.
Sounds great. All right, I'm already in.
Awesome.
Thank you. Okay. I'm sure we had some collaboration with them in the past. Just want to catch up with things that we might be able to add more resource to this as well.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic. I know a lot of the localizations run really small teams usually or traditionally. So I think all the help we can get for the localization efforts would be great.
Okay. Yes, and just to update you, we've been actually localizing all the training material for Kubernetes as of an ATP, and we just return all that resources back to the Linux Foundation. And the terminology that we have in there would be good to have all synchronized with what's going on in this localization team. So that's a contribution that I would be more than happy to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that'd be a very welcome contribution as well. And it sounds like a lot of the hard work is done.
Oh yeah, once you get the whole, all the updates, is just a small percentage.
Definitely.
Sometimes.
Yeah, it's never done, but it's better off.
All right, great. Thank you.
No problem. Cool. Anything else folks would like to talk about? Cool. Hear nothing?
One more thing.
You got it.
Any suggestion on when do we supposed to promote contributors? As in when there are new contributors, the contributors have been contributing a lot. when is the right time to promote them to become a Kubernetes org member? And then from there, when are we supposed to promote them again to reviewers and then eventually approvers and owners? Is there a recommended practices there? Like so far, we've been gathering consensus on this, and we get confused. We at first we come up with some sort of threshold. Like when someone already raised 10 PRs, for example, they can get promoted and things like that. But recently, since the number of contributors keep growing, the thresholds don't make sense anymore. And I don't know. And maybe, our team also grows bigger. Seems that approach doesn't make sense anymore. Need your suggestions on this.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a great problem to have. You know, we have too many people that want to help. So you're in a good spot there. There's a little bit of a gray area or a blur between the privileges and responsibilities when you're talking about localization, mainly because when a localization starts, the very first people who contribute to a localization need to be org members. They need to have some of these different higher level permissions. So the getting started of a brand new localization tends where you have these approvers pretty much overnight. And that's due to the fact that you can't ask somebody to open up a bunch of English PRs if English isn't their native language, but they're willing to help translate some of the documentation. Now with that, I did send a link in the chat and I put a link in the agenda. There are some general community guidelines that are followed for promotion within, when to join the org. There's a certain set of criteria, how to join the org, as well as becoming a reviewer, some of the responsibilities there, as well as an approver. So with saying all that, it's a very clear framework, but I believe there is a little bit of, I don't want to say wiggle room per se, but when we're talking about localization, we want the folks who want to help to be able to help with localization. So it's a little bit of a judgment call as well as some of the criteria that previously exists. Ultimately, you want to make sure that the people you're promoting to a higher level of trust understand the responsibilities of their new role, what is expected of them. And if they've been active reviewing tons of pull requests and they've been very active in the localization efforts and they meet the criteria to be an approver, let's say, then absolutely they should be promoted to be an approver and given the functionality needed to approve pull requests or review pull requests.
Okay, I didn't know about this guideline. And we can explore this.
Awesome. Yeah, and like I said, it's a little bit of a gray area when it comes to localization, mainly due to the first few contributors to a localization. There's a kind of an expedited on-ramp to Kubernetes org membership, as well as, approver status or reviewer status. Once we're talking about teams that are expanding, we just want to be available to help encourage folks who are interested in helping. The whole purpose of having this framework in place is not to deter anybody from contributing. It's more or less to set expectations. And hopefully if you're considering making them a reviewer or an approver, they've already met or exceeded those expectations within reason.
Yeah, makes sense. And what happened when a promoted member has been recently inactive?
Yeah, so we have this happen in all areas of Kubernetes as well as documentation. And what we've done is we've made them, we've opened up pull requests to remove them as the approvers or opened up pull requests to remove those permissions, but it's not a punishment or punitive. We make it very clear in the issue, hey, we haven't been active on Kubernetes website repository for a while. You're welcome back at any time. You can reference this pull request where we removed you. We're happy to reinstate your permissions. However, we can't have you be an active approver and not contributing.
Okay, makes sense.
And I think that's the important thing there is it's not a, shame on you for not contributing. It's people, especially now with how strange the world is and everything going on, people have life situations. Everyone has different jobs, different responsibilities. We're not here to to tell people shame on you or anything like that. It's more, you know, you haven't been around. We'd love to have you back. Hope all is well. And we would open a PR to remove their access if that were the case.
Okay, thanks.
Yep, no problem. Any other topics or folks would like to chat about or learn a little more about the documentation process? Cool. You're nothing. It was great meeting everybody. I appreciate you spending the time, and I'll talk to you later.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
thanks,
bye.
Jim.
See you.
Thank you. Bye.